The government of Israel is pushing back against accusations that it's intentionally starving people in Gaza. Israel is making it clear Hamas has been stealing humanitarian aid.
The international propaganda battle is being fought as the United States Middle East envoy is on the scene to take a first-hand look. Paul Petit brings us the story from Jerusalem.
U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff arrived in Israel as international pressure on Israel over the war against Hamas in Gaza is increasing. This week, a wave of countries announced it would recognize a Palestinian state if the war doesn't come to an end soon. Canada followed France and the UK in making the moves. Germany is holding off for now, but Palestinians are encouraged by what they're seeing so far.
Regarding Canada's recognition, for me, this is an achievement for us because all the countries have started. France was the first, then Canada and Spain. It's clear that we have reached a broader understanding of the Palestinian cause.
But Israel doesn't see it that way. Witkoff met with Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem on Thursday and is touring Gaza with U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee today to inspect distribution of aid. Delivering more food to Gaza is their first order of business. President Trump tells NBC News that good management will prevent Hamas from stealing the aid. Israel is facing mounting pressure along with claims of deliberate starvation. Israel's ambassador to the U.S. is blasting those accusations.
In the month of June, 2,134 trucks were sent into Gaza. Only 260 arrived at their destination. That means 90% was diverted by Hamas. Now, you want to blame us for that too? I mean, for crying out loud. You want to blame us for conducting a war while we're providing as much humanitarian aid as possible. Hamas is using this propaganda to score points in the international community, and like a social contagion, everybody is picking this up.
Case in point, the New York Times finally admitted the photo of an emaciated child in their front page article on Gaza starvation last Friday actually had a pre-existing medical condition. Even a former Times opinion editor called it, quote, a remarkable deception. But many believe the global headlines demonized Israel. Trump posted that the fastest way to end the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is for Hamas to surrender and release the hostages.
Mr. Witkoff, you're landing now in Israel. Make this visit history.
Relatives of Israeli hostages took to the streets of Jerusalem Thursday. They're depending on Trump, Witkoff, and Netanyahu to make something happen.
Please end this nightmare for all the Israeli people.
This is the most Jewish thing to do. This is the most Christian thing to do. This is the only correct thing to do.
This group has been in staunch opposition to the way Netanyahu has handled the war in Gaza. But now that more countries are joining the UK and France in recognizing a Palestinian state, it's forcing them to rethink their position, understanding that it creates a very slippery and dangerous slope.
This is my fear, that this is rewarding them while they are still hostages.
As for Palestine statehood, outspoken Hamas critic and son of its co-founder summed it up by saying, October 7 didn't happen because Palestinians were denied a state. It happened because they were given one.
When you're declaring a Palestinian state while there are still hostages in Gaza, you are saying to all the terror organizations in the world, do you want to have an independent state? Go ahead, enter to a sovereign country, abduct, kill, slaughtered people, burn babies, rape women, and then the entire world will be with you and will declare your new nation. Is this the world we want to live in?
In Jerusalem, Paul Petit, CBN News.
Well, our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell joins us now from Jerusalem. And Chris, I'm just saddened by the state of affairs that it seems truth is being stood on its head. What's the response in the Israeli government to now an international push for a Palestinian state?
Well, Gordon, from the foreign minister, the prime minister, and other leaders are saying it would be a reward for Hamas and for terrorism. And the question some are asking here, Gordon, is where did this whole international push for a Palestinian state come from? And it's really kind of simple. First, Hamas steals much of the food and aid going into Gaza, creates a humanitarian crisis. Then Hamas blames Israel. Then the international media, like the New York Times and Paul's story, picks up the story, and this puts pressure on world leaders. So they pressure Israel to declare not only a ceasefire, but also a Palestinian state. So this convinces Hamas their strategy's working, so they stop negotiating. And by the way, the accusations of famine began just weeks after October 7th, Gordon. And just this week, the UN is accusing Israel in this publication of using thirst as a weapon. So much of this is happening, and it's really the battle for truth here in Israel.
Well, I keep pointing out that the population of Gaza was hungry. There was a Stanford survey done right before August, before October 7th, and found that most Gazan, the majority of them, had food insecurity. They didn't know where their next meal was coming from, and that's under complete Hamas control. Why is that narrative not being spread? It just seems the news media seems to willingly want to be a propaganda arm for Hamas.
It really feels that way, Gordon. I mean, when you talk about the New York Times, and that picture not only was on the New York Times, but other publications throughout the world, and that narrative seems to continue to be followed. And it's up to the government right now is trying to push back on that narrative. And you saw in Paul's report, the Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid trying to just convince CNN that Israel is doing what it can to bring in all of this aid. And yet we see right now the battle is not only on the narrative, but also on the aid itself. And that's why Steve Witkoff, as well as Ambassador Huckabee, were in Gaza earlier today at the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, where they have distributed about 100 million meals to the people of Gaza in the last couple of months. And that's where Hamas and the UN itself are competing against the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, because that undermines the control that Hamas and the UN have over the Gazan population.
Well, the Israeli public opinion and political opinion has been famously divided over the last 5 years. Is this Palestinian, the call now for a Palestinian state, is that uniting them?
It really is. I mean, the Knesset voted overwhelmingly just a few days ago to reject a Palestinian state. Polls show a majority of Israelis don't want a Palestinian state. World leaders like the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, is saying you can't have a Palestinian state that includes Hamas, and the Palestinian Authority has to be reformed. But earlier today, Gordon, I talked to our good friend Itamar Marcus from the Palestinian Media Watch. He says the reality is different on the ground, and that in official media and in polls, the Palestinian people are simply just like Hamas. In a recent poll, 85% of Palestinians in Judea and Samaria, they oppose disarming Hamas. And then this year on official media, and this is Palestinian Authority media, religious leaders said, quote, Allah count the Jews one by one, kill them all one by one, and don't leave even one. They also say Jews are like Satan in human form. So Marcus is making the point, creating a Palestinian state without Hamas is really a farce, since the people themselves are Hamas. And Gordon, right now on Sunday, Jews here and around the world are marking Tisha B'Av. That's the day when historically calamities have come to the Jewish people, from the very bad report of the 10 spies in the Bible. The first and second temples were destroyed. Jews were expelled from Spain and England on that day, March Sunday, and they don't want another calamity with a Palestinian state.
Well, Israel has been working hard to get aid into Gaza. What more can they do to either alleviate the humanitarian crisis created by Hamas, or also fight this media narrative about starvation?
I would say, Gordon, back to your point, just keep fighting, getting out the truth. There's a military battlefield, but the media battlefield is maybe just as important. The military war may end, but the media war is going to continue. It's simply not a matter of lack of aid. There's the aid going into Gaza compares to the kind of aid going into Berlin during that airlift in 1948, nearly 2 million pounds of aid. So the question is, who are you going to believe? Israel or maybe the New York Times or Hamas or the UN. Yesterday, we talked to Gil Huffman of honestreporting.com. He says people need to decide if Israel is a pariah, if it's committing genocide, or did it save the world by fighting Islamist fundamental terror in Iran and in Gaza as well. And he says it's really important for Christians to be that watch this show to tell their friends the truth about Israel on their own social media.
What can you, right before the announcement of the Abraham Accord, there was a move in Israel to declare sovereignty over the West Bank. Is that now back on the table? Is that something we should anticipate happening in the near term?
I think so, Gordon. There's growing momentum. The Knesset passed a non-binding referendum to declare Judea, Samaria, and the Jordan Valley that integral parts of Israel's biblical and national heritage. And they urged the government to extend sovereignty over these areas. And even the language is changing, and it's on Capitol Hill. Senator Tom Cotton introduced a bill to have the U.S. stop using the term West Bank in all federal contexts and use the biblical term Judea and Samaria. So there's a coordinated push on both sides of the Atlantic, and it marks a major shift in policy, and it recognizes the biblical roots of the land of Israel.
Well, Chris Mitchell, thank you for standing strong with Jerusalem. Thank you for being a watchman on the wall and giving us the true story, and thanks so much for the insight. For you at home, follow what Chris asked us to do. Let your friends know about this false narrative. It's just incredible to me that the New York Times could be deceived by a photo of a child where the claim is this is evidence of mass starvation and the child was suffering from a genetic defect that led to that appearance. Let us stand for the truth here. Stand for what both the U.S. and Israeli government are trying to do to provide food for the people of Gaza. Stand for the truth that it's been Hamas, and not since October 7th, but well before that was withholding food from their own people and seizing it, selling it on the black market so they could get enough money to buy more weapons. That's what they're doing. Hamas is the enemy here. We could have instant peace if they would surrender and release the hostages. That's where all the pressure should be put. It should be put on Hamas.